good evening, or perhaps good morning. Wherever you are, and whatever time your day has brought you to this moment, you're welcome here. This is a space for quiet thought, gentle storytelling, and a slow descent into the distant past, a past that asked much of those who lived it, but reveals itself to us now like sand lifting from an inscription, steady and soft. Tonight, we'll be traveling through time to ancient Egypt, but not the one of blazing sun and grand monuments. Instead, this is a quieter Egypt of reed-thatched homes, clay cooking pots, the rustle of linen in the breeze, and the low murmur of voices by lamplight. It is a place where life was rhythmic, seasonal, and deeply entwined with the river. The Nile. You won't be climbing pyramids or deciphering magical spells. No, you'll be stepping into a day lived slowly, in sandals worn thin, amid homes built from mud and hope. You'll meet pharaohs, yes, but also bakers, temple scribes, widowed artisans, and children chasing hoop toys along dusty courtyards. Let your body rest. Let your breathing settle. And allow the steady winding flow of time to guide you back to where it all begins. Now I'm sure you've all heard about the pharaohs and pyramids and mummies of ancient Egypt. But what was everyday life really like for the average person? Well, that's what we'll find out in today's episode of Time Goes Back. So let's go back in time to ancient Egypt. Now imagine yourself in a modest village nestled along the edge of the Nile. The first light of dawn filters through the open roof of your home. Not yet harsh, but pale and cool, like the inside of a seashell. Your house is made from sun-dried mud bricks, its walls a dusty ochre color. The floor beneath your feet is hard-packed earth, swept daily with bundled reeds. There are no chairs, no glass windows, no tiled floors, just woven mats, clay pots, and low platforms for sleeping. If you live here, you probably rise early, not from an alarm, but from the muffled sounds of neighbors stirring footsteps, the scrape of a pot being moved, the quiet rush of someone drawing water from the well. Outside, a rooster crows somewhere and a dog barks in the distance. The call to prayer from the local temple has not yet sounded. You probably tie a simple linen kilt around your waist. It's rough but breathable, spun from flax harvested upstream. If you're a woman, perhaps you fasten a long sheath dress over your shoulders. Either way, linen is a staple. It holds the desert heat at bay and wears thin with time, softening like old paper. Breakfast, if it can be called that, is quick and functional. Flatbread, perhaps dipped in beer or spread with crushed dates if the harvest has been kind. The beer is thick, more like porridge than drink, and carries a sour tang. It's not brewed for taste, but for calories. If you are poor, and most are, you likely work the land. The soil, dark with silt from the Nile's yearly flood, is rich but unforgiving without labor. You walk barefoot behind an oxen-drawn plow, guiding its wooden frame through wet earth. Your back aches. The sun climbs. You wipe your brow with the hem of your kilt and press on. There are no weekends, no holidays, only feast days dictated by temple calendars. The work is hard, but the rewards can be plentiful. In good years, the land is generous, offering wheat for bread, flax for linen, onions, garlic and leeks for flavor, fresh fish from the Nile and fowl from the marshes. Life is not easy, but there are moments of joy, laughter echoing in the marketplace, children playing by the river, the shared stories around a small fire at night. Life is also deeply intertwined with the rhythms of nature, the flooding of the Nile, the planting and harvesting of crops, the migration of birds. There's a deep connection to the land that's both a source of sustenance and a powerful force of nature. Not everyone is a farmer, though. Perhaps you're a carpenter in a riverside town. You smooth acacia wood with stone tools, crafting a simple stool. Nails are rare. Most joints are lashed together with leather or rope, fitted with skill instead of iron. Your tools are simple, your workspace open to the elements, but your craft is essential, providing the village with the stools, tables, and chests they need. Or maybe you are a washerwoman, spending your day by the riverbank, scrubbing garments with sand and clay to cut the grease. You slap the cloth against flat stones rhythmically, each motion practiced, patient. It's honest work, dirty work, but necessary. The day stretches on, filled with small tasks and routines. The annual flooding of the Nile brings not only challenges, but also a bounty of silt that enriches the soil, making it one of the most fertile regions in the world. This cycle of flood, growth, and harvest sustains the people and their way of life. But it's not all work. There are festivals and celebrations too. When the Nile recedes after its annual flood, revealing the rich, fertile silt that nourishes the land, the people rejoice. They offer prayers and sacrifices to the gods, ensuring a bountiful harvest. The temples come alive with music, dance, and the murmur of prayers. Palm trees sway in the gentle breeze, casting dancing shadows on the ground. The air hums with the buzz of insects and the cries of vendors selling their wares. As the sun nears its peak, the heat grows thick and unmoving. It settles into every surface. The shadows shorten and life slows. People retreat indoors. Meals are cooked over small clay ovens, their fires fed with dried dung or papyrus stalks. Fish sizzles, lentils simmer. The scent of coriander drifts past, mingling with the sharpness of garlic and the earthy base of cumin. Children, barefooted and sun-browned, play in the dust with carved dolls and wheeled toys made of clay. They are loud, then quiet, curious, then still. As evening nears, the village changes again. The light softens, casting long shadows across the walls. Fathers return from fields with dust clinging to their legs. Mothers prepare the last meal of the day, their faces marked by sun and work. Lamps are lit with animal fat or simple oil. The flickering flames give the interior a drowsy warmth. There are no books to read, no screens to scroll. Just conversation, or silence, or the soft music of a flute played nearby. A lute with a gourd body and a cat's gut strings might pluck a tune. A harp with a sound box of wood and a neck strung with linen might weave a melody. The music is often simple, repetitive, meant to accompany daily tasks or set a mood. But it's also deeply expressive, carrying echoes of ancient traditions and beliefs. The evenings are filled with storytelling, with tales of gods and heroes and pharaohs passed down through generations. The elders sit, their voices low and steady, painting vivid pictures of mythical creatures and epic battles. The younger ones lean in, their eyes wide with wonder and a touch of fear. Sleep, when it comes, is a necessity. Your body is tired in a way that modern bodies rarely are, used completely, bent with labor, slowed by sun and time. You lie on a woven mat, perhaps sharing the room with siblings or cousins. The night is still, save for the chirping of insects, the distant bark of a dog, or the low creak of a palm frond brushing the house wall. Tomorrow it begins again. The rhythm of their lives, dictated not by hours or deadlines, but by the turning of the seasons and the flow of the river. A life of simplicity, of constancy, of quiet hardship wrapped in ritual and routine. A life that may feel foreign, but once it was the way of millions. Ancient Egyptian society was highly stratified, with a pharaoh at its head who was considered a divine ruler. Below the pharaoh were priests, nobles, scribes, artisans, merchants, and farmers. Each level had its own rights, duties, and social standing. Priests held a prominent position in society, responsible for maintaining the temples and performing rituals to honor the gods. Their influence and wealth varied depending on the temple's importance. Nobles were the pharaoh's elite, often holding positions of authority and power. They managed estates, led armies, and advised the pharaoh. Scribes were highly respected for their ability to read and write, managing administrative tasks, record-keeping, and correspondence. Artisans produced goods ranging from tools and pottery to jewelry and furniture. Their skills were vital for the economy and the creation of goods for both daily use and for trade. Merchants played a key role in the economy, buying and selling goods within Egypt and in trade with other civilizations. They transported goods, managed markets, and ensured the flow of commerce. Farmers were the backbone of the economy, producing the food that sustained the population. They grew crops such as wheat, barley, flax, and vegetables. Their success depended on the annual flooding of the Nile and the quality of the soil. Slavery existed in ancient Egypt, with slaves typically held by wealthy individuals or temples. Slaves were often captured in wars or purchased through merchants and were used for domestic or agricultural work. However, slavery was not as widespread or central to the economy as it was in some other societies. Religion played a central role in ancient Egyptian life. They believed in a pantheon of gods and goddesses who controlled various aspects of nature and human affairs. The main gods included Re, the sun god, Osiris, god of the underworld, and Horus, god of kingship. Religious beliefs permeated daily life, influencing art, customs, and even government. The afterlife was a significant part of their belief system. They believed that after death, the soul went through a journey to the underworld, where it was judged and determined whether it would attain immortality. The preservation of mummies and the construction of elaborate tombs reflect their fascination with the afterlife. While there were no formal philosophical schools in ancient Egypt, religious beliefs gave rise to ideas about the nature of reality, the human condition, and the purpose of life. The concept of Mat, which represented truth, justice, and cosmic order, was a central theme in their religious and ethical teachings. Family and gender roles were clearly defined in ancient Egyptian society. Men typically worked as farmers, artisans, or soldiers, while women managed households and raised children. Both men and women could own property and participate in religious activities. However, men had more rights and privileges. Polygamy was allowed, and the pharaoh was often depicted as having multiple wives. Women had more rights than in many other contemporary societies, including the right to initiate divorce. Egyptian culture placed a high value on the arts, evident in their monumental architecture, sculpture, and painting. The construction of pyramids and temples showcased their engineering skills and devotion to the gods. Monumental tombs and the treasures buried within them demonstrate the wealth and opulence of the elite. They developed a unique writing system using hieroglyphic characters that combined phonetic symbols and pictorial representations. Writing was primarily used for religious texts, administrative records, and monumental inscriptions. Egyptian society had its own legal system, which was closely tied to religious law and custom. The pharaoh was the ultimate authority, and laws were enforced through a network of officials and courts. Cases involving family matters, Contracts and criminal offenses were settled through a combination of legal precedent and customary practices. Trade was an essential aspect of the Egyptian economy, connecting them with other civilizations in the region. They traded goods such as linen, papyrus, and gold with Mesopotamia, the Levant, and the Nubian kingdoms. Trade networks facilitated the exchange of ideas, technologies, and cultural practices. The use of papyrus, a material made from the papyrus plant, was central to Egyptian record-keeping and communication. Papyrus was used to create scrolls and sheets for writing, accounting, record-keeping, and communication. Egypt's strategic location along the Nile River and its control over important trade routes gave it considerable power and influence. The Nile provided not only a means of transportation, but also the lifeblood of the kingdom through its annual floods. There once was a man who ruled not only as king, but as living God. Yet even among Egypt's long line of divine kings, Akhenaten stands apart, both revered and reviled, remembered and nearly erased. I'm the host, and this is Ancient Worlds from the series Ancient Civilizations. Viewer discretion is advised for this episode, as some viewers may find the content disturbing or offensive. We at the channel and our partners, the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation and Arizona State University, thank you for your support. Before we knew him by that name, he was called Amenhotep IV, born to a world shaped by centuries of tradition. He came of age in a palace where every wall sang the praises of Amen, the chief god of the day. Amen's temples were vast, his priests powerful, his rituals well-worn and rigid with age. It was an era of peace. Trade flourished. The borders were secure. The Nile was generous. And life for ordinary Egyptians was probably better than it would be for many generations to come. And so it was that when Amenhotep ascended the throne, all seemed right with the world. Imagine the court-cool halls lined with limestone, lotus columns casting deep shadows across polished floors. Court scribes whisper. The high priests glance sideways. There is a tremor beneath the surface as Amenhotep prepares to ascend the throne. We don't know exactly when it began, but at some point during his early years as pharaoh, Amenhotep turned his thoughts, maybe his prayers, skyward, toward the Aten, the sun disk. At first, it seems to have been a quiet turn. The young king continued the sacred rituals to Amen, offering incense, smiting enemies, presiding over festivals. And everywhere, the old god smiled down on the pharaoh, sharing in the glory. But somewhere between tradition and eternity, Amenhotep found inspiration, a spark of innovation. He commissioned a hymn to the Aten, and its words echoed through Egyptian courts for centuries to come. O living Aten, you appear as a lovely, radiant sun, afar in the sky, far above, overlooking everything. You encircle all the lands with your rays. Then you shone on all things which you created. Soon, this small flicker became an insistent flame, growing steadily brighter. Now, Amenhotep changed his name to Akhenaten, servant of the Aten, and from there, the changes no longer whisper. They shout. Temples to Amen were shuttered. Images of old gods were defaced. And most striking of all, Akhenaten abandoned Thebes, the city of his ancestors, and built a brand new capital in the desert. Akhetaten, the horizon of the Aten, what we now call Amarna. Picture this new city, rising from sun-baked plains. It is laid out with mathematical precision-wide roads, open courtyards, palaces adorned with sunbeams instead of jackals or falcons. Every structure is designed to let in the light. No dark inner sanctuaries here. Worship is open, visible, unhidden. Most everyone who lived here was painted with an orange hue, as though the very sun had bathed them in its glow. Akhenaten is shown front and center, always male, never female, never in between. His body type is unusual, thin and androgynous, with long neck and large head. Often he is surrounded by members of his family, most notably his chief queen, Nefertiti, tall and regal, often shown standing as his equal. Their daughters trail behind, catching beams of sunlight in their shaved heads. In wall carvings, the royal couple is unusually intimate, holding hands, kissing, cradling their children. These are not the stiff profiles of earlier dynasties. There is a warmth, a realism, even a vulnerability. It is clear that unlike any pharaoh before him, Akhenaten had a remarkably close relationship with his wife. Together, they oversaw this strange new city, its brilliant layout marred by one critical flaw. It was not built on the banks of the Nile, but 200 miles inland, in a flat and waterless stretch of desert. Even if it had been designed to harness the power of the sun, Akhenaten needed water. And water it did get, thanks to an ingenious system of irrigation canals, aqueducts, and reservoirs. But such engineering works required a tremendous amount of labor. Meanwhile, Akhenaten's grand vision left other pressing matters unattended. The old temples were not just places of faith, they were engines of economy. By closing them, Akhenaten shifted wealth and labor on an unprecedented scale. The powerful priesthood of Amun, sidelined and silent, seethed. The nobility, confused by the loss of tradition, grew uneasy. And the common people, left behind in a dying city, saw the sun shine, but crops fail. Farmers struggled without the fertilizing floods of the Nile. They turned to the traditional gods for rain, but none came. Desperate, they traveled to the new capital, where a pharaoh claimed to be a god himself, and begged for help. Many never received it. The common folk were invisible to Akhenaten, the same way he was invisible to the governors of his far-flung territories. Letters have been found pleading for troops, for aid, for news from the capital. None arrived. And bit by bit, Akhenaten's realm began to slip away. Yet within the city of Akhenaten, the pharaoh continued his vision. He penned hymns to the Aten, verses that spoke of light bringing life to all things. One survives to this day, eerily reminiscent of later religious poetry. You drive away the sickness, you bring health. You art, O living Aten, like unto Re. Like unto Re, you art, O living Aten, like unto Re, the Father of life, who gives life, who renews life. He is, in many ways, the first monotheist ruler on record. But the rest of the story is not his alone. It belongs also to Nefertiti, whose origins remain mysterious. She disappeared halfway through Akhenaten's reign and was never heard from again. Some say she returned to Thebes after her husband's death. Others claim she spent her final days in the obscure city of Kadesh. Still others believe she outlived Akhenaten and ruled briefly as pharaoh in her own right. Though much of her story is lost, one thing is certain. She played a key role in building a new kind of Egyptian state, one where the pharaoh and his queen defied tradition, bent tradition, and sometimes broke tradition. Akhenaten died after 17 years. What followed was a swift and decisive reversal. The boy king Tutankhamun took the throne, changed his name to Tutankhamun, and restored the worship of Amun. The old gods returned. The capital shifted back to Thebes. and Akhenaten was stricken from the lists of kings. Statues were smashed, his face was chiseled away. He became a ghost in the record. For centuries, Akhenaten was forgotten. It was not until modern archaeologists uncovered the shattered remains of Amarna that his story slowly emerged. Sun-bleached ruins holding whispers of radical change, bold faith, and deep isolation. His reign was brief, just 17 years, but within it lies one of history's most curious experiments. What happens when a god-king dares to reshape the heavens and loses? Thanks for watching. All the sources used are listed below. And a special thanks to our supporters, whose support makes it possible for us to share these stories with everyone for free. Join them and become a supporter today. As we leave the sun-soaked city of Akhenaten behind, let us step now into the desert, into a place where time has stood still under shifting sands. While Egypt flourished in the embrace of the Nile, far to the northwest, beyond deserts, across seas, and into the shadow of a great mountain, another city once lived and breathed under the eye of a sleeping giant. Tonight, we take a slow walk through Pompeii. It is not, strictly speaking, an Egyptian tale, but it is deeply linked to the ancient world, a sister to the cities of the Mediterranean basin. And it offers something Egypt rarely does, a moment perfectly preserved, a single ordinary day, captured forever. Imagine yourself in the early morning of August 24th, 79 CE. Though some scholars now wonder if it was truly August, the air is warm, as it often is in Campania. The sun rises over a bustling Roman city homes with open courtyards, markets thick with voices, the steady clatter of sandals on paved stone. Pompeii is alive. Vendors call out prices in the forum. Children race through alleyways, trailing laughter. The scent of bread, still baking, drifts from small ovens along the street. There are brothels and bathhouses, temples and taverns. A painter works carefully on a wall fresco in a wealthy man's villa. A slave empties water into a gutter that runs alongside the main road. A senator's wife checks her reflection in a bronze mirror, adjusts her hair, and prepares for guests. And then something changes, a low, distant rumble, unnoticed at first. Then another, closer. Mount Vesuvius, long quiet, begins to stir. A tremor runs through the earth. At first, people pause in their work. Some look up, uncertain. Then more quakes, closer still, and people begin to move. A few hurry home, locking shop doors behind them. Others stand irresolute, unsure of what to do. Still others point toward the mountain and cry out in alarm. Ash falls lightly from the sky, at first mistaken for snow. Then the tremors come again, stronger. The air grows hot. People run, stumbling over each other in the narrow streets. The sky darkens. The air thickens. Panic begins. People shout. Some flee. Others hesitate, uncertain, waiting for it to pass. But it will not pass. A surge of hot gas, ash, and pumice barrels down the mountainside. Roofs collapse under the weight. Fires start, burn out, start again. The day turns to night. By morning, the city is gone, quiet, buried beneath meters of volcanic debris. And for nearly 1,700 years, it sleeps. Centuries pass. Fields are plowed over its resting place. Memory fades. Pompeii becomes a whisper, a name lost on a crumbling map. Then in the 18th century, digging begins. Not for history, but for treasure. Soon, explorers and scholars realize what they've found: a city in pause. Streets as they were, homes, furniture, tools. Mosaics on floors, graffiti on walls, a jar left on a shelf, a loaf of bread still recognizable in an oven. Even the people remain, some huddled in corners, others caught mid-step. Plaster casts made from the voids and ash show their shapes, curled fingers, bent knees, open mouths. The final gestures of ordinary lives made eternal. There is a quiet power to Pompeii, not because of what happened there, but because of how completely it lets us see what came before. We know now what a Roman kitchen looked like when it was messy. We know what jokes were scribbled on tavern walls. We know the names of people who weren't emperors or poets, but bakers, servants, dancers. From Egypt, we have grandeur. From Pompeii, we have life, paused in all its mundane beauty. And so, as we leave behind the darkened ruins, stepping gently over time-worn stones and past crumbling walls, let us now turn our gaze once again to Egypt. Not the Egypt of forgotten workers, nor the heretic king, but one of silk and scent, of rank and ritual. A life lived behind fine doors. Today we explore the lavish life of Cleopatra and the gilded cage of her final years. And don't forget, if you love these tales, every Sunday we bring you new adventures. Until next time, farewell. The year is 323 BCE. The place, Alexandria, the jewel of the ancient world, where empires meet and the treasures of 3 continents converge. Here, amidst the scent of cinnamon and myrrh, Pharaoh Ptolemy I rules with the heart of a conqueror and the mind of a scholar. In his court, a brilliant light shines even brighter, his daughter Cleopatra. Already a legend in her own right, she rules by his side, preparing for the day when she will inherit this kingdom of dreams. Their nights are spent in moonlit gardens, their days in councils of state, balancing trade routes, brokering peace deals, presiding over the construction of grand libraries, and welcoming visiting dignitaries. Yet for all their glories, shadows lurk at the edges of their world. Ptolemy has chosen a new bride, a young princess from a faraway land, and Cleopatra senses her father's affections drifting. When he dies unexpectedly, she seizes her chance. She and her sister, the twins, arrange a marriage between themselves and Ptolemy's grieving heir, Caesarion, legitimizing their claim to the throne, but the rest of the empire may not agree. One suitor in particular threatens to disrupt the balance of power in the east, Antiochus III, the ambitious Seleucid monarch, whose designs on Egypt could shatter everything Cleopatra has worked for. Now she must choose her allies wisely, and none is more valuable than Rome. Cleopatra sends Caesarion to Rome to secure an alliance, and he returns with the most powerful man in the world, Mark Antony. As the armies of the Seleucids approach, Cleopatra and Antony set their forces in motion. Cannons roar, chariots crash, and in the midst of it all, 2 lovers meet. For Cleopatra has laid her own siege, capturing Antony's heart. Together, they plan to resist the Seleucids, to defend the Nile, and to build their own legacy. Their triumph will be short-lived. As Cleopatra gives birth to twins, Antony is called away to fight a civil war. The legions of Octavian, his former friend and Caesar's adopted son, are marching on Alexandria. Cleopatra must summon every bit of cunning and power to save her throne and protect her children. But no amount of wit can overcome fate. For when Antony meets his end, Cleopatra is faced with a choice. She can submit to Octavian and live, or she can die on her own terms. With a final touch of theatrical flair, she chooses death. As the last royal descendant of Alexander the Great, she ends her bloodline, plunging the kingdom of the pharaohs into darkness. Her story echoes through the ages, inspiring awe and wonder. Yet few know the full tale of how she held her ground against invading armies, defied her own treacherous sister, and chose death over surrender. Join us as we uncover Cleopatra's hidden strength and reveal the epic battles she fought to protect her crown. But first, a word from our sponsor. Have you ever wanted to visit ancient Egypt? Now you can with Google Arts and Culture. Their online collections showcase treasures from the British Museum, including the Rosetta Stone and the Elgin marbles, as well as artifacts from across the globe. This virtual tour takes you inside the tomb of the boy King Tut, giving you a 360-degree view of the burial chamber and its treasures. You can even explore high-resolution images of ancient artifacts like this Egyptian coffin. Google Arts and Culture also offers virtual tours of famous museums and landmarks like the Colosseum and the Louvre. And if you're feeling creative, you can make your own 3D model of an artifact or artwork and bring it to life on your phone. It's easy to get started. Just go to the website below and sign up for a free account. Now back to our story. The year is 320 BCE and Cleopatra has just become the ruler of the Egyptian kingdom after the death of her father, Ptolemy I. Though she shares power with her younger sister and co-consort, Arsinoe IV, it is clear that Cleopatra is the true leader of Egypt. She is renowned throughout the Mediterranean for her intelligence, her charm, and her mastery of languages. But her authority is constantly challenged by her power-hungry sister. As tensions rise between the sisters, Cleopatra finds herself facing a new threat from the east. Antiochus III, the ambitious king of the Seleucid Empire, is marching on Egypt with an army of 30,000 men. His goal, to annex the prosperous Egyptian kingdom and add its vast wealth to his own treasury. With her kingdom at risk, Cleopatra must choose her allies wisely. She turns to the Greek mercenaries, the elite soldiers who have long protected Egypt's borders, but their loyalty is divided, and many are eager to defect to the highest bidder. Meanwhile, the Egyptian people are demoralized and dispirited, crushed by years of heavy taxes and brutal crackdowns. Cleopatra knows that she cannot rely on brute force to defeat Antiochus. Instead, she must win the hearts and minds of her people and convince them to rise up and defend their homeland. But as Cleopatra rallies the Egyptians, she finds herself torn between two worlds. On one hand, she is the proud pharaoh of Egypt, determined to protect her people and preserve her kingdom's independence. On the other, she is a woman in love with a Roman general, torn between her duty to her homeland and her heart. As the Seleucid army approaches, Cleopatra must make a decision that will determine the fate of her kingdom and her own destiny. Will she embrace her role as pharaoh and lead Egypt to victory, or will she follow her heart and risk losing everything? Imagine you awaken before dawn, not in a thatched village hut, but in a side chamber of a vast stone temple. The walls around you are smooth, carved with holy symbols and the names of pharaohs long dead. Cool air drifts in through the high-set windows, tinged with the faintest scent of oil lamps still burning from the night before. You are a priestess of the temple, not a ruler of men, but a servant of the divine. Your role is one of dignity, precision, and quiet purpose. You rise in silence. No one speaks yet. You cleanse yourself with cold water. Ritual purification is required before you may approach the sacred spaces. Every movement has meaning. You dry yourself with fine linen, still stiff from washing. You do not dress lavishly. Your robes are plain, white, unadorned, but clean, always clean. Outside your chamber, the temple is vast and solemn. Massive columns, shaped like lotus and papyrus, rise to hold up shadowed ceilings. The walls are alive with stories, battles, offerings, divine births and cosmic judgments, all captured in raised reliefs that dance with light and shade. In the innermost chamber, hidden from public view, rests the shrine of the deity the temple serves. It could be Isis, or Hathor, or Mut. The god's likeness is enshrined in gold or black stone, veiled behind heavy cloth, touched only by the high priest. Your tasks do not take you to this inner sanctum. You prepare the offerings, small trays of bread, fruit, and cooled water. You grind incense, measure oil, and inspect the ceremonial items that will be used throughout the day. You help tend to the temple animals, perhaps sacred cats or birds, fed carefully and protected as living symbols of divinity. You do not work alone. There are other priestesses, some old, some young, and a strict order to your duties. Senior priestesses might read sacred texts or oversee recitations. Others train girls in music, in dance, in proper form. For festivals, you rehearse rituals and hymns, your voices blending in long, repetitive chants meant to soothe the gods and perhaps yourselves. There is little room for improvisation. Rituals are inherited, passed down like heirlooms. Mistakes are not punished loudly, but they are noted. And always, your presence is public, even when it feels private. Worshippers watch. Nobles visit. Temple scribes record each rite. Every breath taken near the altar is, in some way, an act of performance. But there are quiet moments too. Perhaps you retire briefly to a shaded courtyard where palm trees sway slowly overhead. You sip water from a ceramic cup, feeling the breeze stir your robes. You hear the muted sound of sandals scuffing stone floors, the far-off call of a temple musician tuning a harp. You do not speak much. Your role is contemplative, but you observe, you listen, you remain. And in rare private hours, you may pray. Not aloud, not with the grandeur of a public rite, but simply, silently. You may ask for health or peace. You may not know if the gods listen, but your role is not to question. It is to serve. By night, the temple quiets again. Ceremonies end. Torches are extinguished, leaving the halls in deep shadow. You return to your chamber, your bare feet cool on the flagstones. You untie your robe, smooth the wrinkles from its folds, and lie down on a woven mat. The stone around you holds the day's heat, now slowly fading. Outside, the city is distant. Within these walls, time feels slower. The past and the divine press in from all sides until your own thoughts grow small and still. You do not dream often, but when you do, they are dreams of symbols and sun, of river reeds and painted gods, of voices singing softly from chambers deep within the stone. The Nile is a lifeline, a long, meandering ribbon of water stretching through an arid landscape that would otherwise be barren and silent. For ancient Egyptians, its presence was not taken for granted. Each drop of water was hard-won, carefully measured, and deeply respected. Imagine yourself walking beside one of its slow-moving canals in the heat of the day. The water is warm, brown with silt, and barely moving. A man leads a pair of oxen through the shallows, pulling a plow through black, sticky soil. The scent of wet earth hangs in the air. This is Kemet, the Black Land, fertile and rare, gifted by the Nile's floods. But the river's blessings did not reach all corners evenly. Not every home had access to water flowing past its doorstep, and so water had to be moved. In smaller villages, water jars were filled by hand. Pottery amphorae, wide at the base and narrow at the neck, were carried on shoulders, balanced on heads, or slung over donkeys. If your home sat further from the river, collecting water might be a daily task, one that consumed hours of the day. In larger towns and temple complexes, shadufs became common. Picture a tall wooden pole with a counterweight on one end and a bucket on the other. You grasp the pole, lower the bucket into the canal, and with the aid of the counterweight, lift it splashing and heavy and pour its contents into a stone-lined trough. From here, water is directed into irrigation channels, storage jars, or reservoirs carved into the earth. These techniques changed little for centuries. What mattered was not invention, but consistency. The system had to function every day, especially during the dry months when the Nile receded and the land cracked beneath the sun. Water was stored in cool, shaded places. Clay cisterns were partially buried to keep them from heating. The jars were often sealed with linen or papyrus to keep insects out. A well-off household might have a servant tasked with tending the family's water supply, scrubbing jars, fetching fresh buckets, keeping the water from going stale or muddy. And yet, despite their care, water could not always be trusted. There were years when the flood came too low and the soil turned to dust. Other years, the river swelled too high, drowning fields, homes, and even entire villages. These were not just weather events. They were cosmic disruptions, signals, perhaps, of divine displeasure or disorder in the heavens. Scribes recorded flood levels on millimeter stone markers set along the river's edge. A high reading could mean abundance or catastrophe. A low reading meant famine. The people watched the river like a living god, waiting for signs, praying for balance. In the capital cities, water had different roles. In the palace of the pharaoh, it was used to cleanse, to refresh, and to display power. Pools were constructed not only for bathing, but as symbols of divine order. The water reflected the sun god. It mirrored the heavens. To float in its depths was not just luxury. It was a statement of harmony between man and cosmos. But such luxury came with hidden costs. As cities grew, water had to travel farther. Stone pipes and ceramic channels carried it through gardens and courtyards, but these systems were imperfect. Debris blocked channels. Animals muddied the wells. And when drought struck, even the finest house found itself rationing. Even sacred water, the waters of purification used in rituals and temples, had to be gathered from specific places, often upriver, far from the dirt and noise of the city. It was carried in sealed jars, escorted by priests, kept under watch like treasure. And when water failed, so too did order. Disease crept in during dry years. Agricultural cycles broke down. Families migrated. Temples closed. Grain ran short. The Nile gave life. But when it faltered, the loss was not only physical, it was spiritual. The rhythm of their lives depended on water's return, year after year, quiet and faithful. Today, the Nile still flows, but the world it once nourished, of shadufs and silent jars, of priests and peasants and watchful scribes, is long gone. Only the marks remain, carved into stone, etched into flood markers, painted on tomb walls with small figures carrying jars, always the water. Imagine yourself standing in front of a mirror, if such a thing existed in ancient Egypt, inspecting your reflection. Your linen robe is neat, your kohl eyeliner carefully applied, your skin smooth from frequent cleansing with natron and scented oils. You smile politely, as one might in a ritual or greeting. But behind that calm, composed smile, your teeth are failing. To modernize, ancient Egyptian art suggests beauty and grace-fine clothing, elegant figures, serene expressions. Yet what those painted smiles do not reveal is a far more common and troubling reality. Dental disease was widespread in ancient Egypt. It is one of the most consistent discoveries in mummified remains: worn, cracked, infected teeth. But the causes weren't from sugar or candy. They were more insidious and rooted deep in the Egyptian diet and environment. For example, one of the staples of the Egyptian diet was bread. A lot of bread. It was the foundation of their daily meals, baked from emmer wheat or barley, and cooked on clay ovens or stone griddles. But these breads weren't made with soft flour. The milling process used stone querns, which often left tiny fragments of sand and grit in the flour. So every bite of bread wore the teeth down slowly, year by year. Molars ground flat. Enamel vanished. Some teeth cracked entirely, exposing nerves. Infections spread from abscesses to the jawbone. There were no toothbrushes. No dentists in the modern sense. Just pain, endured in silence. For a farmer, this meant chewing carefully. For a child, it meant growing up with sore gums. For an elderly priest or artisan, it meant a steady decline into difficulty eating, speaking, even sleeping. But did they try to fix it? There is evidence that the Egyptians attempted early dental treatments, though limited and rudimentary. Some skulls show signs of drilled teeth, possibly to relieve pressure from infections. A few specimens include line wads or resin-like fillings, likely an effort to plug holes or reduce discomfort. More commonly, healing was sought through medicine and magic. For example, papyrus texts from the time include spells and herbal remedies for tooth pain. Clove oil, frankincense, and even powdered incense might be rubbed on sore gums. One remedy instructed the user to apply mashed dates mixed with cumin and onion juice, an unusual concoction, but likely numbing in its own way. Toothaches were seen as more than physical. They could be a sign of demonic interference or divine punishment. Amulets were worn. Prayers were offered to deities associated with healing, like Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of plague and medicine. But even with divine assistance, most Egyptians lived with constant oral discomfort. In fact, ancient Egyptian culture seems to have been aware of dental issues to an almost painful degree. Artwork sometimes depicts people holding their cheeks or grimacing. Depictions of dental disease appear in some unexpected places too. Carvings at the entrance to the underworld, meant to frighten or warn the living, often show figures with missing teeth, suggesting that even in death, dental woes follow. It's as if the Egyptians in life and in death couldn't escape the ache in their smiles. The extent of this ache became clear when Europeans rediscovered ancient Egyptian mummies in the 19th century. At first, the sight of shriveled, blackened teeth was met with fascination. After all, mummies were new to Western eyes, and their decayed mouths were part of the macabre spectacle. But soon, scientists began to notice patterns. As X-ray technology developed, the insides of mummies revealed themselves more fully. And then came the sobering realization: virtually every mummy examined showed signs of extensive dental disease. Even the pharaohs, those distant demigods of the Nile, had teeth like the rest of us. and like the rest of us, they suffered. Pharaoh Ramesses II is a famous example. He ruled for 66 years from 1279 to 1213 BC, leaving behind a legacy of war and building projects. His body, however, shows another story. Ramesses is known for his mostly intact mummy, which is housed in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. When examining his remains, scientists found several problems. First, he had lost most of his lower teeth. In their place were either gaps or crude metal prosthetics. Why would a powerful pharaoh with access to the best care in the kingdom lose his teeth? The answer, surprisingly mundane: wear and tear. According to a 2010 study published in the Journal of Dentistry, Ramses' condition was not unique. Ancient Egyptians across social classes suffered from dental attrition, the loss of tooth substance caused by things like acid, erosion, or mechanical wear. In other words, his teeth were ground down over a lifetime of eating hard bread and vegetables. Some of his remaining teeth also show abscesses and exposed nerve tissue, which explains why he needed dental work. In addition, there are signs of gum disease, which caused further tooth loss. When Ramses was around 50, he suffered a serious head wound during battle. This injury may have affected his ability to eat, forcing softer foods and potentially altering his speech. Later in life, he started wearing dentures made of ivory and gold. Even so, his condition worsened. By the end of his life, he was in considerable pain. This is evidenced by the advanced stages of bone necrosis or death in his upper jaw. These conditions combined to make the last decades of Ramses' life miserable. He was unable to eat solid food, likely because of his advancing periodontal disease. He would have experienced persistent bad breath and facial swelling. The trauma to his jaw also caused him to lose his sense of balance. Given Ramses' prominence, you might assume that priests or advisors would have stepped in to assist him. But the pharaoh was famously stubborn and fiercely independent. He refused help from others, choosing instead to suffer alone. The sad state of Ramses' mouth offers a striking counterpoint to his larger-than-life image. He is usually portrayed as a strong, energetic ruler, and yet he spent his final years in agony. Unfortunately, his case was not unique. Dental disease was widespread in ancient Egypt, affecting both the rich and the poor. According to studies published in the Journal of Forensic Sciences and the British Dental Journal, most adult Egyptians suffered from multiple cavities, worn enamel, and missing teeth. Children were not spared either. Permanent teeth erupted early, likely due to a diet high in carbohydrates and abrasive foods. This resulted in accelerated tooth wear, which may have contributed to misalignment and further dental problems. Some researchers argue that the ubiquitous dental disease actually helped shape ancient Egyptian society. Historian and archaeologist Paul Mann suggests that the pain associated with these conditions forced many people to adopt softer diets. Egyptians primarily ate bread made from emmer wheat, which has smaller grains than modern wheat. This grain was easier to chew, especially as teeth became worn and damaged. Another theory attributes dental disease to the domestication of animals. According to this view, the shift from hunting and gathering to a more sedentary lifestyle led to increased carbohydrate consumption, which in turn caused tooth decay. Whatever the cause, the effects were profound. People with severe tooth loss experienced substantial pain, bleeding, malnutrition, and social stigma. Dental disease therefore played a role in shaping religious beliefs too. Toothaches were seen as punishments from the gods. Prayers for relief frequently included promises to alter one's behavior. Egyptians even created amulets to ward off dental problems. These objects, typically made from leather or faience, were inscribed with protective spells and placed near the dead to aid them in their journey through the underworld. Though the origins of dental disease remain unclear, its consequences were very real. Today, much of this knowledge comes from studying mummies, which provides a disturbingly intimate look at the past. Through the examination of teeth, jawbone, and skull, researchers learn not only about ancient Egyptian life, but also their deaths and what came after. One reason mummies are so valuable is that they preserve details that would otherwise be lost to history. The Egyptians practiced ritualistic embalming, which removed internal organs and dried the body, making it extremely durable. As a result, human remains from Egypt are often thousands of years old. Studying these remains helps fill in the gaps in traditional historical records, which tend to focus on the lives of the elite. Dental remains are particularly helpful in this regard. They record a lifetime of experiences from early childhood to old age. Researchers can tell how a person died based on injuries to their teeth. They can also determine someone's diet and overall health. For example, isotopes in tooth enamel can indicate whether someone ate mostly plants or animals. Meanwhile, abnormal wear patterns suggest a change in diet or the use of drugs. Teeth also hold clues about where a person lived. Different regions have different water compositions, and these can be detected in tooth enamel. Scientists can thus identify where an individual grew up and migrated to later in life. Dental remains are also less likely to be lost or stolen compared to other artifacts. They are heavy and bulky, so they're less portable. This means they often stay in or near their original context, providing more complete information for researchers. What's more, few things survive from ancient Egypt that are as visually striking as mummies. There is something undeniably captivating about these preserved remains. They represent tangible links to the past, allowing us to peer directly at ancient life. Yet this fascination has also led to exploitation. Since the late 18th century, grave robbers have pillaged Egyptian burial sites, stealing artifacts and remains for profit. Today, the illegal trade in antiquities continues. While the Egyptian government has made efforts to combat this problem, illegal excavations persist. This is made worse by the fact that the discovery of mummies is often treated as private property. Those who find such remains can sell them without oversight, leading to the mistreatment of priceless artifacts. It's a grim irony that the pursuit of quick money results in the desecration of ancient tombs. Perhaps surprisingly, the study of dental remains is an important part of this enterprise. Unlike other parts of the body, teeth are resistant to damage and decay. They can survive thousands of years and retain their shape and substance. As a result, they are often the only part of a mummy that is complete and undamaged. It's perhaps fitting then that teeth play a key role in helping researchers understand ancient Egyptian life and death. They offer insights into individuals from all walks of life, from farmers and laborers to priests and pharaohs. Through these humble remains, we learn about everyday challenges, such as toothaches, and extraordinary circumstances, such as the life of a pharaoh. The streets outside may be hot and bustling, filled with farmers, merchants, and animals. But within a modest chamber of smooth stone, shaded from the heat and echoing faintly with distant temple chants, sits a man who does not farm or fight or build. He writes. He is a scribe, one of the most respected professions in all of ancient Egypt. Imagine him seated cross-legged on a low mat, a wooden board across his knees. Before him lies a roll of papyrus, pale and fibrous. Beside him, a small palette with two colors, red and black. Red for emphasis and headings, black for the body of the text. His reed brush is trimmed to a fine point, carefully dipped into a shallow dish of ink ground from soot or ochre. The room smells faintly of papyrus dust, ink, and warm stone. There is no rush, no distractions. Only the quiet scratch of brush on page, steady and rhythmic. But don't be fooled by the tranquil scene. Writing in ancient Egypt was no easy task. It required years of study, a keen eye, and steady hands. This was no quick or casual job. In fact, if you ever want to learn about the world of ancient Egypt, this is one profession you'd want to know about. After all, without scribes, there would be no written records, no way to keep track of anything, no laws, no stories, no history. Now let's go back to our scribe. As we mentioned, he's not just a writer. He's a recorder of grain tallies, a composer of contracts, a keeper of rituals, a transcriber of prayers. He writes for priests, for officials, for the king himself. He may not hold land or lead armies, but his knowledge of writing gives him access to places others never see: archives, courts, sacred libraries. To become a scribe, you needed to learn the art of writing. Now, don't imagine that ancient Egyptian writing was anything like what we use today. Instead of letters, they used pictures called hieroglyphs. At first, these were carved in stone, each sign taking the shape of an entire word. But over time, this slowed down. So Egyptians developed a faster form called hieratic, which was written on paper using a reed brush and ink. Even then, there were hundreds of signs to remember, each with multiple meanings depending on the context. Every stroke mattered. Imagine learning a language where every letter could be a word, but its meaning shifted based on how you said it. It would be tricky. That's why training took years. If you were lucky enough to be born into the scribe class, your days were spent at the House of Life, a kind of school attached to temples. There, under the eyes of older scribes, you practiced characters on broken pottery or flakes of limestone. You copied proverbs, religious texts, legal forms. The goal was not creativity, but precision. If you survived all those years, congratulations, you're officially a scribe. But that doesn't mean you're done learning. In fact, now the real education begins. Your job will depend on where you serve. Some scribes sit beneath the shade of a fig tree, keeping track of grain coming into a warehouse. Others work in royal treasuries, recording gifts to the pharaoh. Temple scribes copy hymns, map star calendars, or keep records of offerings, each one counted and categorized with care. A few work on tombs. These men write the prayers that will guide souls into the afterlife. They paint words onto coffin lids, inscribe spells inside pyramids, etch sacred texts into the Book of the Dead. Their words are meant not just to record, but to protect, to preserve, to give eternal life through ink and stone. It was important work, so important that the dead pharaohs were buried with copies of their own books of the dead. Each page was meticulously painted and inscribed with protective spells. The scribe's work here was vital, ensuring the pharaoh's safe passage to the afterlife. So you may think these scribes lived pampered lives. After all, they served the pharaohs and the gods themselves. Well, not exactly. Life for a scribe was not all that glamorous. Most worked long hours in dusty rooms. Yes, they were clean, and yes, they were respected. But while they might move through elite circles, they were still servants of the temple, the state, or the crown. The pay was decent, But their homes weren't palaces. Scribes carried writing boards, not swords. They were scholars, not soldiers. And while their work was vital, it wasn't always exciting. Much of it involved record keeping and inventory. Imagine sitting in a cool room, shaded from the sun, surrounded by papyrus scrolls. The rhythmic scratching of a quill is the only sound besides the buzzing of flies. Outside, the heat shimmers off the sand. Inside, it's cool and quiet. You dip your quill into a jar of black ink and begin to record the day's offerings to the gods. Grain, fruit, flowers, even live cattle are brought in. Each item must be carefully noted. You tally up the grain, record the types of fruit, and note the number of cattle. Even the weather is recorded, just in case some priest wants to check for any unusual occurrences. The rest of the day is spent copying down hymns to the gods and making sure the records from the morning are neat and tidy. By the end of the day, you feel a sense of satisfaction. You've done your duty and kept the record straight. The temple runs smoothly because of people like you. But don't worry, this isn't all there is to being a scribe. Your duties will change depending on where you're needed most. One day, you could be working in a grand palace, the next in a bustling marketplace, and another in a tomb deep in the desert. Let's say you're working in a grand palace, serving the pharaoh directly. Your days are filled with important tasks. You record the pharaoh's speeches, draft letters to other rulers, and keep track of the kingdom's finances. It's a lot of responsibility, but you're up to the task. Then there are the tombs. These are special assignments, usually given to the best scribes in the kingdom. When a pharaoh dies, you're summoned to the palace to record their deeds and prepare their body for the afterlife. You comb through the pharaoh's life, noting their victories, building projects, and gifts received. All of this is recorded on stone tablets placed inside the tomb. It's a somber duty, but an important one. The pharaoh's legacy rests in part on your ability to record their life accurately. When you're not working, you enjoy the perks of your position. You get to rub shoulders with the elite and powerful, and you have access to some of the finest food and drink in the kingdom. It's not a bad life, but it's not without its challenges. The hours are long and the work is demanding. Mistakes are not allowed. One wrong stroke of your quill and an entire temple record could be ruined. The pressure is intense, but you rise to the occasion. You take pride in your work. In fact, ancient Egyptian texts often praise the life of the scribe. One famous example, known as the Satire of the Trades, paints a somewhat smug picture. All other jobs are filthy or backbreaking. Only the scribe sits clean, educated, and respected. Perhaps exaggerated, but it reflects the cultural esteem for those who held the pen. That's right. Being a scribe wasn't just a job, it was a calling. You're not just recording grain or making copies of ancient texts. You're preserving the history of Egypt. You're making sure that the deeds of kings and the prayers to the gods are written down for all eternity. It's a heavy responsibility, but you take it seriously. After all, scribes played a vital role in ancient Egyptian society. They were the ones who kept the records, both mundane and monumental. They recorded the daily activities of the pharaoh, such as when he went hunting or met with officials. They also documented major events like battles or the construction of a new temple. But scribes didn't just record facts and figures. They were also responsible for keeping track of time. They created calendars and observed the stars to develop accurate methods of tracking the passage of time. This was essential for religious purposes as well as for practical matters like planting crops. They also served as judges and advisors. Because they were generally well educated and had access to a vast amount of knowledge, scribes were often called upon to settle disputes and offer counsel to the pharaoh. In some cases, they even acted as diplomats, representing the Egyptian interests in dealings with other kingdoms. The skills and knowledge of the scribes were so valued that they were often given positions of power and influence. Some scribes rose to become high officials in the government, while others served as priests or advisors to the pharaoh. Their expertise was essential to the functioning of ancient Egyptian society. So, what did ancient Egyptians eat? How would they prepare their food? And how was it connected to their beliefs? Well, I'm glad you asked. Join me as we explore how food sustained ancient Egypt, how it related to the gods, and how its rhythms echoed through millennia. It's me. Welcome to my channel, where we bring history to life. Today, we're stepping back to ancient Egypt. This series explores ancient cultures through their art. And today, we're diving into what ancient Egyptians ate. Now, let's set the scene. Imagine yourself waking in the early morning, the sky already warming under a pale gold sun. You rise and head toward the small open-air kitchen courtyard behind your home. There, in the corner, is a clay oven little more than a dome-shaped fire pit, blackened by years of use. It's already warm to the touch. Someone has been up earlier than you, lighting the fire, coaxing it into flame with twisted reeds and dry dung cakes. The day is beginning, and soon the rest of your household will stir. Your wife will join you, perhaps with 1 or 2 children. Your sons are old enough to tend to the fields, while your daughters help in the house. After greetings and a moment's rest, the work begins anew. Your first task, gathering fuel for the day. You stuff dry reeds and dung cakes into your bag along with some sticks you found earlier. Then you gather grain from last year's stores, just enough for the day. Emmer wheat, a hardy grain that thrives in the heat, will be today's bread. You carry it out back to the courtyard and to a flat stone grinding slab known as a quern. And here the real work begins. Crouching beside the cool stone, you begin the slow work of grinding the grain. The motion is steady, side to side, long and repetitive. It takes strength. First the grains are ground coarsely, then finer, until they become a kind of coarse flour. In the dust of the flour are tiny flakes of stone worn away from the grinding tool. Unnoticeable, yet destined to wear down your teeth over a lifetime. Once ground, you collect the flour and put some aside for later. With more grain, you continue the rhythmic grind, working steadily, not quickly. The finished flour is stored in a woven basket, ready for baking. Soon, the sun climbs higher as you begin your other duties, checking the family's goats, collecting firewood, perhaps trading in the village square. As the hours pass, the heat builds, making it hard to do much else besides rest in the shade. So you recline, watching lizards dart between rocks, listening to birds calling overhead. As the day wanes, you return home, stopping at the bakery to pick up the day's bread. It is dense, flat, and sometimes sour. It might be sweetened with figs or flavored with caraway or coriander, but usually it is plain. The dough was shaped by hand and slapped onto the side of the hot oven or baked on heated stones. Back home, you wash your hands and face and take a moment to rest before evening chores. Your wife has prepared a supper. On a small table outside, She sets down a pot of bubbling stew and 2 ceramic cups filled with beer. You sit with her, sharing news of the day and enjoying the warmth of company as you eat. Nearby, a pot bubbles gently over a low fire. Its contents, lentils, perhaps, or a porridge of barley and leeks, thickened with crushed beans. You stir slowly with a wooden spoon, careful not to scorch the bottom. A pinch of salt adds flavor, but it is precious and used sparingly. Onions and garlic, though, are plentiful. Their sharp scent fills the air, mingling with the earthy aroma of wet clay and boiling grain. You crush them with a flat stone, adding them to the pot. Some bits fall onto the fire and sizzle away. Beer, too, is part of the meal, though it resembles little of what we know today. It is thick and cloudy, more like a mildly fermented grain soup than a refreshing drink. Brewed from leftover bread, it carries a faint tang and a slight fizz, and is drunk from ceramic cups without handles. If it's a good day, you may have fish from the Nile, dried in the sun or roasted fresh over coals. Tilapia, catfish, or perch, seasoned with local herbs. Meat goat or goose is rare, often reserved for feast days or sacrifices. When used, it is stewed or salted, its fat rendered into cooking oil. If it's fig season, you enjoy sweet, juicy fruits fresh from the tree. Or maybe dates, fresh from the oasis, plump and sticky. Figs, fresh or dried, are also delicious. With the meal done, you help clear the table. Your children have gone to bed, and the night grows cooler. It is time to rest. Perhaps you tell stories or sing songs, or maybe you just watch the stars come out and dream of the coming day. That was a glimpse into an ordinary day in ancient Egypt. Now let's talk about something extraordinary: the role of food in Egyptian religion. In the bustling heart of ancient Thebes, imagine yourself standing before the temple of Min, the god of fertility and the pharaoh's patron deity. Before you, priests prepare an offering for the morning ritual. Platters piled high with freshly baked bread, glazed with oil and sprinkled with seeds, sit beside joints of roasted meat and glistening bowls of fruit. A silver carafe of wine waits nearby, ready to be poured as a libation. This is no ordinary banquet. Each item is chosen with care to please the gods. You watch as the priests, garbed in crisp white linen, chant prayers, their voices echoing through the vast hall. They carry the offerings, one by one, to the statue of Min, placing them before his image. In this sacred act, the priests believe that they are providing sustenance for the gods, ensuring their favor upon the city and its people. The offering is not merely placed there. It is a communion, a shared meal between the divine and the human. The priest's prayers weave magic into the food, transforming it from mere sustenance to a conduit of power. As the ceremony ends, the remaining food is shared among the temple staff and servants. Though touched by the divine, it is still nourishing, a quiet echo of the god's own banquet. In this way, food transcended its earthly purpose. It became a link to the spiritual realm. Every ingredient, every bite, held the potential to connect mortals with the gods. This wasn't just a ritual. It was a reminder of life's deeper truths. Food was more than sustenance. It was a language of devotion, a symbol of connection, and a tangible expression of faith. But what about times of hardship? How did food sustain the Egyptians when the Nile flooded poorly or famine threatened? Picture a village nestled along the banks of the Nile, its people accustomed to the rhythm of the river's bounty. But this year, the flood has been weak. The waters have receded, leaving the fields parched and cracked. The grain harvest is meager, and worry ripples through the community. In homes like yours, grain stores dwindle, and the staples of daily meals become scarcer. The daily bread seems thinner, the porridge less filling. Each family adjusts, stretching their supplies, making each portion last a little longer. In the village square, the atmosphere is subdued. The laughter of children at play is replaced by hushed conversations. The marketplace, once vibrant with the chatter of merchants and the promise of plenty, now reflects the scarcity of the season. Grain vendors, their faces etched with concern, offer smaller portions at higher prices. Yet despite the challenges, life continues. The sun still rises, casting its warmth over the village. The Nile, though diminished, still flows, carrying with it the hope of better days. Meals, though smaller, still offer moments of comfort. A pot on the fire, bread in the coals, the familiar tasks offering a rhythm of sorts in a sea of uncertainty. The taste of each dish may not be as rich, but its importance in sustaining the body remains unchanged. In this time of need, food is not about taste or pleasure. It's about endurance, about keeping body and spirit nourished through tough times. Even the rituals at the temple take on a new tone. The offerings, though prepared with the same reverence, reflect the simpler meals of those struggling through the lean season. But through it all, life goes on. Children still play, stories are still told, and the bonds of community strengthen in the face of adversity. So even when the Nile doesn't give its bounty, food sustains them. Imagine yourself lying on a flat roof of a mud brick house, the night warm and still. The stars stretch overhead in silent brilliance, undimmed by firelight or noise. You hear the river faintly in the distance, and the slow breath of wind rustling through palm fronds. Above you, the sky is not empty. It is a book filled with sacred stories. If you knew where to look and what to read, you could glean all kinds of useful information from the positions of the stars and the patterns they made. Indeed, the heavens themselves seem to have been put there to serve humankind. We tend today to think of constellations as fixed, unchanging things, part of the background hum of existence. But to the ancient Egyptians, the sky was alive with meaning. Theirs was a dynamic vision of the universe, one that shifted and changed and breathed along with the earth. Let's take a closer look. The ancient Egyptians were some of the earliest sky watchers in history. But they did not divide the heavens into neat, modern constellations. Instead, they saw a cosmic order, a divine structure that mirrored the world below. The sun, of course, was central. Each day it rose in the east and set in the west. Just as the souls of the dead were believed to travel, carried by Re, the sun god, in his solar bark, at night, Re descended into the underworld, battling darkness, only to be reborn again in the dawn. This daily cycle of light and dark was more than poetic. It was the foundation of cosmic stability, known as Mat. To the Egyptians, the sun did not merely rise, it was reborn. But the stars, too, played their part. They had their own stories to tell if you knew their language. Take, for example, Sopdet, whom we know today as Sirius. The heliacal rising of Sirius, when it first appeared at dawn after disappearing behind the sun, coincided almost exactly with the annual flooding of the Nile. This event, crucial for agriculture, was both anticipated and celebrated. Festivals were held, temples aligned. It was not just a natural occurrence, it was divine timing. Sirius was associated with the goddess Isis, and her appearance in the sky was seen as a signal of renewal and fertility. The Nile swelled. The fields drank. Life resumed. But that wasn't all. As the evening progressed, other members of the Big Dog constellation would rise. In fact, the Egyptians divided the sky into groups of stars called decans, which rose consecutively throughout the night, marking time like a slow celestial clock. Each decan marked about 10 days of the lunar month. By observing them, priests could tell not just the hour, but also the progression of the calendar year. So while we may see 27 stars making up the Big Dipper asterism in the constellation Ursa Major, the Egyptians saw 3 distinct decans, each heralding its own segment of time. And the Egyptians didn't just track these star groups as they climbed higher in the sky. They paid attention to the buildings they visited too. Many temples were aligned with celestial events. The rising sun might illuminate a sacred statue on a specific day. Doorways pointed to solstice or equinox events. These were not accidents, they were architectural prayers carved in stone. For instance, the famous entrance to the Temple of Hathor at Dendra aligns with the rising of Sirius, underlining the connection between the cycles of the heavens and the earthly realm. The Egyptians also divided the sky into zones, with various gods inhabiting different regions. The band of the Milky Way, stretching across the darkness like a pale river, was seen as a celestial Nile, a shimmering band of light reflecting the flow of life and eternity. Above this, the northern hemisphere was home to the goddess Nut, personifying the sky, who was imagined as arching over the earth. Her body was covered in stars, forming a protective dome that cradled the world. Below her, near the horizon, lived the god Shu, representing the life-giving air that humans needed to breathe. Between them flowed the river of the sky, connecting heaven and earth, keeping them in balance. Even timekeeping, too, relied on the heavens. The Egyptian calendar was surprisingly precise. It divided the year into 12 months of 30 days, with an additional 5 epigomenal days, a clever correction for the solar cycle. Each day was governed by rituals, offerings, and timing based on celestial cues. But astronomy was not a science in the modern sense. It was a form of worship, a method of harmonizing life with the cosmos. To track the stars was to read the will of the gods. To know the heavens was to understand the rhythms of both birth and death. It's easy to forget that the concept of constellations, of reading omens from the night sky, emerged not out of scientific curiosity, but from a desire to make sense of a world utterly dominated by forces beyond human control. Astronomy in ancient Egypt wasn't just about understanding the universe. It was about feeling deeply connected to it. For the ancient Egyptians, the sky was more than just a backdrop. It was a living, breathing entity filled with stories, events, and messages. And those who understood its language had a deeper connection to the rhythms of life, death, and rebirth. Their careful observations kept the people in tune with the seasons, with the floods, with the cycles of the gods. In essence, the ancient Egyptians created a map not just of the heavens, but of their place within it. And in doing so, they wove a rich tapestry of meaning into the fabric of their daily lives. Even tombs were carved with star charts maps of the afterlife, lit by constellations. Pharaohs, in death, hoped to become imperishable stars, taking their place in the sky, shining forever over the black land. So tonight, as you lie beneath the stars, know that you are not alone. You are watched by the same constellations seen by ancient scribes and shepherds, priests and peasants. The same light that reflected in the Nile now glimmers above your own quiet room. Picture yourself walking into a sunlit courtyard, where blocks of stone lie in neat rows, some pale, some veined with quartz or pitted with age. You hear the steady tap-tap-tap of chisels against rock, the scrape of bronze tools, the occasional cough of dust in the throat. You are in the artisan's quarter. Specifically, perhaps, in a place like Deir el-Medina, the workers' village for the royal tombs of the Valley of the Kings. This is not a place of monuments. It is where monuments are made. Here, amidst the rumble and rasp, a young sculptor works. He is not famous. You won't find his name in the records. You won't find his face carved on any wall. He sits cross-legged before a rough-hewn block of quartzite. You can't make out the form within, only guess at what might emerge. From weathered hands and forearms, he knows there's a god in there, though. He feels it in the grain of the stone. The rest is up to him. The sculptor begins his day as he does every day. A splash of water, a dab of oil, a quick prayer to the gods of craftsmanship. Then he squats before his material, one that has already been chosen for him. Officials from the tomb's construction site brought it here, quarried from the hills outside the city. It's bigger than he is, harder than he is, more ancient than he is. He is nothing compared to this rock, yet he will change it. That gives him quiet pride. He isn't like the scribes, all numbers and words. He is a maker. He will shape stone into something enduring, something beautiful, something timeless. He starts with sketches, simple outlines drawn in red ochre, then corrected in black. He uses a reed pen, dips it in ink, and traces over the lines again, making sure they're correct, that they'll hold up. The proportions were guided by grids based on standard body measurements, the distance from heel to knee, from elbow to wrist. These mathematical rules ensured the harmony of the whole. Even the gods obeyed proportion. Once satisfied, he is ready to begin. First, a rough cut with a dolomite hammer. The heavy stone tool feels good in his hand. With each swing, he hears the rock splitting within. It's satisfying, like cracking a nut. But there's no turning back once a blow lands. He has to make every strike count. He moves to copper chisels, harder and sharper. Now, the design takes shape, first in curves, then in planes, then in angles. It's hard, dirty, tiring work, but he is young, strong, learning from years of watching others. A finished statue will need a fine polish, but right now he is shaping, not smoothing. There's no point in rushing. A mistake now would be a ruin. He pauses, wipes the sweat from his brow, dips his finger in water, and checks his progress. Good. Sleep on it. Come back tomorrow and chip away again. He takes a break. The village sprawls around him, busy, noisy, alive. He walks past mud brick houses, greets friends, nods to elders. When he came here as a boy with his father, this is where he wanted to live. It wasn't the palaces or temples that fascinated him, but these humble homes. Each contained a craftsman working wonders. He returns home, eats bread with his wife, talks about his day with his children. At night, after everyone is asleep, he comes back to the courtyard. The moon is his lamp. The silence is his company. As dawn approaches, his work is almost done. With an abrading stone, he smooths the surface, chases away the chips and flakes. The sun climbs higher. Now he uses smaller chisels, sharper and finer. Sand and water help smooth and polish the surface to a low shine. When the form is complete, he stands back, cups his hands around his mouth, and speaks, "I have finished." No one will hear him. No one needs to. He's spoken for the gods. It's enough. The hardest part is the face. He spends hours on it. Every line had to carry meaning, power, divinity, eternity. He considers these as he works, feeling the weight of tradition in his hands, of history pressing on his shoulders. A statue's face was its most important feature. It was the focus of ritual, of prayer, of offerings. People didn't pray to an abstract god, but to a god made real in stone. A sculptor had to capture the divine essence, the inner fire. He had to imbue the cold rock with life. The final touch was gilding the eyes with a thin sheet of gold. He does it carefully, remembering an old master's lesson. The eyes must follow the sun. They must watch over all. As the heat of midday approaches, he goes back to the village, leaving the statue to the sun and shadows. Later, he will return and check his work. If he sees something he doesn't like, he'll fix it. If the temple officials find something they don't like, he'll fix that too. Most sculptors worked on several statues at once. Some days were spent copying stock poses, seated scribes, striding pharaohs, kneeling figures. Some days they were creating new ones. Whatever the task, the work must go on. Deadlines mattered. Construction couldn't wait. Sometimes the work was rushed. Other times, political changes meant that faces were recarved, names scratched away. A new king meant new rules. A god fallen from favor had his face removed. The sculptor's chisel became a tool of memory, even of erasure. But none of this was his fault. It wasn't personal. It was just work. The end of the year was always hectic. Tomb building slowed during the flooding season. Everyone moved indoors, which meant everyone was sculpting indoors. Airless rooms filled with dust, men covered in grime, chipping away in silence. Now, this piece is special. He can feel it, though he can't explain how. Maybe it's the way the light hits the stone, maybe the angle of a vein, maybe just another Tuesday. But something about this piece makes him want to do better. He stops to look at his hands. They're calloused, strong, older than he is. But beneath the dirt and grease, there's something else. Talent. Today, he feels it hum in him. So he works faster, steadier, more precise. He'll finish this one. He'll do it well, because he wants to. He never signed his work, but sometimes he left his mark. In rare places like Deir el Medina, you can find graffiti and personal notes scratched into walls, where a sculptor might proudly name his role in a tomb's creation, a tiny signature in a timeless medium. The work was done. He stepped back, looked at the statue, nodded slowly. It was good, but it wasn't finished. Not yet. When it left the workshop, it would be taken to the temple or tomb where it belonged. But until then, it would stay here, in this courtyard, under the open sky, ready for the next step. The statue was naked. It needed clothes. The sculptor would turn it over to the painters, who would adorn it with linen and jewels. They'd add the final touches, the colors, the details, the ornaments. But right now, it was his responsibility to get it ready. He took a long chisel and made sure the bottom was flat. That way it could sit firmly on the floor or pedestal. Then he checked the back. Was it level? Did it lean too far forward or backward? This mattered. Balance was everything. Once he was satisfied, he gave it one last look, then stepped back. It was done. He didn't know who would one day see it, nor if it would stand for 5 years or 5,000. But he shaped it anyway, as he was taught, precise, patient, reverent. He walked away, leaving the courtyard and the statue to the rising sun. As he did, he heard the rhythmic tap-tap-tap of chisels against rock. The song of the artisans echoed around him. He joined it with a smile. For him, this was more than work. It was a life. The pharaohs are gone. Their tombs are empty. The valley of the kings is silent. But in the halls of eternity, some things remain. Not the treasures of greed, nor the trappings of power, but echoes of lives lived, stories half forgotten, and a craft that outlived empires. The sculptor's silence speaks across the sands of time. In every curve, in every plane, in every line, he captured a moment, a feeling, a belief. He wove magic with hammer and chisel. And though his name may be lost, his work remains a testament to human spirit. In stone, the sculptor found his voice. You can learn more about the Valley of the Kings through additional resources. Explore the secrets of this archaeological treasure trove and uncover more about ancient Egypt's fascinating burial practices. For thousands of years, the ancient Egyptians elevated beauty and cleanliness to an art form. It wasn't just about aesthetics, it was a ritual, a devotion, a sign of respect for themselves and their gods. Welcome to my channel. Today we're diving deep into the fascinating world of ancient Egyptian beauty and hygiene practices. You won't believe the lengths they went to look their best. Now let's turn back the clock and discover the secrets of their beauty regimen. Imagine the feel of smooth linen against your skin as you rise. The air is dry, but cool for now. You reach for a shallow basin of water and rinse your face, splashing gently. There is no soap, but there is natron, a naturally occurring salt used not only in mummification, but in daily cleansing. It leaves the skin dry, clean, and faintly gritty. Cleanliness was not just a matter of appearance. It was a moral virtue, a mark of civility and respect for the gods. Both men and women took great care to maintain personal hygiene, believing it was a way to stay pure and healthy. While the wealthy could afford servants to help them bathe and groom, laborers took pride in their appearance, too, washing, oiling the skin and shaving when they could. Hair, often a source of discomfort in the heat, was kept short or completely shaved. To protect the scalp from the sun and to enhance their appearance, both men and women wore wigs. These were not crude disguises. They were carefully constructed from human hair, often mixed with plant fibers, braided intricately and perfumed with resin and oils. A wealthier person might wear a heavy wig tied with ribbons, oiled until it shone in the sunlight. Atop the head on special occasions, a cone of scented wax might be placed melting slowly over the course of the day, releasing myrrh or lotus essence as it softened. It stained the wig and skin lightly with perfume, subtle, intimate. These elaborate hairstyles and perfumes were not just about looking good. They were part of a larger religious context. The Egyptians believed that the pharaoh was a divine king, a link between the gods and the people. And so the pharaoh's image, even in art and on coins, was carefully crafted to convey divinity. Wigs and makeup were seen as a way to transform the ordinary into the sacred. It was a way of bringing the outer world into alignment with the rhythm of the cosmos. But it wasn't just the pharaohs who took pride in their appearance. Commoners, too, wore makeup, though their styles were simpler. Makeup, too, was essential. Eyes were lined thickly with kohl, a dark paste made from galena or soot mixed with fat. This was not simply for beauty. It reduced glare from the sun and protected against infection. Both men and women wore it. It framed the eyes dramatically, lending them an almond shape that appears again and again in tomb paintings. Lids were shaded with malachite green or powdered minerals. Cheeks might be dusted with red ochre, lips tinted with crushed petals or clay-based pigments. The aesthetic was bold, but always controlled. There were conventions, styles passed down like tradition. Perfume was worn daily. Not sprayed, but dabbed, pressed, gently massaged into the skin. Oils were made from moringa, sesame, and castor beans, sometimes scented with cinnamon, frankincense, or blue lotus. They served a dual purpose: hydration in the dry heat and a pleasant scent that signaled refinement and purity. Scent was so important that perfume production was an art in itself. Temples even had perfumery workshops where priests prepared sacred blends used in rituals. Certain oils were believed to calm the gods, cleanse the spirit, or banish disease. While the focus has been on the elite, it's important to remember that cleanliness and grooming were important across society. Men and women of all social classes took care to present themselves well. It was a sign of respect, not just for the gods, but for themselves and their community. Even the tools used for grooming held symbolic meaning. Combs were not just for styling hair, they were also used to anoint the dead. The handle resting on the deceased's chest, the teeth spreading a loved one's hair as incense was applied. Ritual objects became extensions of the self, connecting the living to the dead through shared customs. In the tombs of the elite, archaeologists have found cosmetic kits containing small jars of coal, tweezers, nail cleaners, even miniature combs. The dead were anointed, dressed, and painted. Their cosmetics included in burial kits a mirror, a comb, a tiny coal jar, all placed lovingly in the tomb. Because in the afterlife, one must still be beautiful. Hygiene extended beyond the body. Clothing was freshly washed, white linen, carefully pleated, often starched. Shoes, if worn, were cleaned and simple. Jewelry was polished, made of faience, turquoise, or gold. Each item balanced aesthetic pleasure with symbolic protection. An amulet was never just decoration. Inscriptions and spells emphasized this link between beauty and sanctity. To be clean was to be close to the divine. To be perfumed was to be welcome in the presence of the gods. To apply kohl was to see and be seen with clarity. Now let's talk about a very taboo topic of the time: removing body hair. The Egyptians didn't shy away from removing unwanted hair, both for aesthetic and practical reasons. Depilation, as it's called, was common among both men and women. The most popular method was using a sharp tool, kind of like a tweezer, to pluck the hair from the root. This was not only effective, but also had a hygienic aspect to it, since it prevented ingrown hairs and skin irritation. Egyptians weren't just meticulous about their own appearance. They believed that keeping the body free of hair enhanced its beauty. In general, the removal of body hair was seen as a way to achieve the perfect physical form, which was believed to be harmonious and pleasing to the gods. This practice wasn't limited to any particular social class. It was common among both the elite and commoners. They viewed it as a necessary part of maintaining cleanliness and order in their lives. It was not just about removing unwanted hair, it was about achieving balance and perfection. So while we might find some of these practices unusual today, they were deeply ingrained in the cultural and religious norms of ancient Egypt. It gives us a unique insight into their worldview and the lengths they went to achieve physical and spiritual harmony. As you sit in the quiet of this imagined chamber, the air sweet with warm oil and faint spice, you begin to see what beauty truly meant to the ancient Egyptians. Not indulgence, but order, care, devotion. A way of bringing the outer world into alignment with the sacred rhythm of the universe. Imagine yourself reaching into a small wooden box carved with care and soot darkened from years of use. Inside lie delicate shaped scarabs, eyes, ankhs, tiny falcons, each made of stone, faience, or metal, cool to the touch and worn smooth with time. You choose one and tie it to a strip of linen, wrapping it around your neck. It is more than decoration. It is protection. We might think of amulets as quaint, pretty little charms, souvenirs from travels, trinkets on an antique shelf. But for the ancient Egyptians, they were much more than that. They were powerful, active agents, shaping daily life, bridging the realms of the living and the dead. Amulets were everywhere in ancient Egyptian life. Worn by the living, carried in pouches, sewn into clothing, buried with the dead. They came in many forms: bright turquoise faience, glinting gold, red carnelian, but they all shared a single purpose: to guard, guide, or grant favor. To understand how amulets worked, it helps to know what each shape meant. First, let's take a look at some of the most popular examples. A scarab, shaped like a beetle, symbolized rebirth and regeneration. It echoed the god Khepri, who rolled the sun across the sky each morning. These were among the most common amulets, worn around the neck or placed over the heart during burial. The Eye of Horus, or Wadjet, represented healing, protection, and restored balance. One could wear it on the body or paint it on a ship's prow or a house's doorframe. It watched. It warned. It healed. The Ankh, shaped like a looped cross, was the sign of life itself. Not only physical life, but eternal life. To wear it was to align oneself with vitality, divine favor, and continuation beyond death. Other forms included lions for strength, frogs for fertility, lotus flowers for rebirth, and jet pillars for stability. Each symbol connected to a myth, a god, or a cosmic principle. But amulets were not casual trinkets. Their power had to be activated. Priests conducted rituals to charge amulets with sacred energy, often reciting incantations as they wrapped them into the linens of a mummy or placed them inside a burial chest. In temples, amulets were crafted with ritual purity, using prescribed formulas and sacred words, often during specific festivals or celestial events. That means that every amulet had a story and a history. It might have been crafted for a pharaoh by a priest during a procession. It might have been made in a workshop for sale in a market. It might have been a gift given by a lover or a parent to their child. How amulets were used tells us as much about ancient Egypt as what they looked like. Children wore amulets around their necks to ward off illness. Soldiers carried them into battle. Mothers placed them under pillows. Even animals, cats, baboons, ibises, might be buried with tiny chimes to protect them in the next world. In short, amulets permeated every aspect of life. They were part of family life, religious practice, economic exchange, even fashion. And because they were concerned with protecting people from harm, they also functioned as a kind of record. Some amulets bear names, either of the person who owned them or of the deity they represent. Others have inscriptions, sometimes brief spells, sometimes lengthy prayers. Let's read a few together. This simple example reads, "May he who reads this live healthily many years." Another says, "I am the guardian spirit of my master. banishing evil from him. And here, may Ra give life to him who has recited this spell. Reading these out loud can feel silly. We know that amulets aren't literally inscribed with spells. We also know that nobody is actually going to hurt us. But that was not the case in ancient Egypt. Amulets were part of a system of magic, and they were used with intentionality and seriousness. There was a practical side too. Amulets were often part of the economy of workshops, crafted in quantity, sold in markets, gifted in temples. There were fine pieces for the wealthy gold and lapis inlay, and simpler versions for common folk, made from molded clay or powdered quartz. But even the humblest piece held deep symbolic weight. When preparing the dead, priests carefully selected amulets for specific locations. The heart scarab rested over the chest. The two fingers amulet was placed near the embalming incision. The Isis knot was tied near the throat. Each had its purpose. Each a silent companion for the soul's long journey through the underworld. When the tomb was sealed, these objects remained behind, quiet and unmoving. Yet still, in the Egyptian mind, very much active. Because to them, symbols were not metaphor. They were real. A falcon was not just a falcon. It was Horus. A knot was not just fabric. It was the bond of Isis. The amulet did not represent power. It held it. Now, this is easy for us to dismiss as superstition, but think about the amulets we wear today. When we put on a tiny silver elephant for good luck, we are acting in the same way the ancient Egyptians did. Symbols are real. Amulets work. These small objects, however, were not merely fetishes. They reveal a great deal about how people saw the world around them. For example, since amulets were typically made of materials like stone, metal, or faience, they were durable and portable. This reflects the Egyptians' belief that the world was full of danger, but also full of possibility. They wanted their protection to last a long time and to go with them wherever they went. They also created amulets in the shape of certain animals because they believed those animals had special powers. For instance, the Egyptians kept amulets with them while traveling because they thought the animals could help keep them safe on the road. Similarly, they buried amulets with their dead because they thought the animals would help guide their souls through the afterlife. Another interesting thing about the Egyptian amulets is that they were often made in the shape of gods or goddesses. This is significant because it reflects the Egyptians' deep religious beliefs. They believed that the gods and goddesses had the power to protect and guide them, and so they wore amulets in their likeness as a way of invoking that power. For example, the Eye of Horus was often used as an amulet because it was believed to have healing powers. The Egyptians also used amulets to protect themselves from evil spirits. They believed that evil spirits could cause illness or bring bad luck, and so they wore amulets to keep them away. In conclusion, the amulets tell us a lot about ancient Egyptian culture. They show us that the Egyptians were deeply religious and superstitious people who believed that the world was full of both danger and opportunity. They also reveal a great deal about the Egyptians' beliefs about the afterlife. Since they believed that the dead could continue to be harmed by evil spirits, they took great pains to protect their bodies and souls with amulets. Finally, the amulets demonstrate the Egyptians' belief in the power of symbols. They believed that certain shapes and materials had the power to invoke the gods and protect them from harm. So the next time you find an old, small object, no matter where or how, take a moment to consider its shape and material. What do they remind you of? Do they evoke any feelings or memories? Because in that tiny stone or metal pendant may lie an entire universe of meaning, a whisper from someone long gone, and a reminder of the power of symbols. In the flickering lamplight, hieroglyphs dance on the wall. Above, the ceiling beams with painted stars. Beneath them, hushed voices weave tales of gods and kings. This is our digital recreation of an ancient Egyptian temple. Our series explores ancient worlds through immersive storytelling and historical research. We bring history to life through engaging narratives that allow you to experience the past in a new light. Join us as we take you on an adventure through time. The temple looms tall above you. Its walls are cool in the early light. The outer courtyards are open to the sun, but the deeper you go, the darker it becomes. Echoes fade. Sound softens. The scent of incense and oil hangs in the air, and the light comes only in sliver shafts of sunlight that catch drifting smoke like threads of gold. The temple is not a church, and the priest is not a preacher. He does not deliver sermons. He does not seek converts. He serves the gods directly. Imagine yourself in the sandals of a temple priest. You do not speak unless required. You rise before dawn, well before the city stirs. The first task of your day is not spiritual, but practical purification. You wash. Not once, but repeatedly, you shave your head. Your entire body is hairless, a symbol of cleanliness, of discipline. You wear clean white linen, freshly pressed. No jewelry, no perfume beyond sacred oil. You are now ritually pure. Only in this state may you enter the sanctuary. Temples in ancient Egypt were grand on the outside, but inside they narrowed into more sacred spaces. The deeper chambers held statues of the gods, sometimes small and simple, sometimes large and gold-covered. These statues were not art. They were living embodiments of divine presence. Each morning, a priest would wake the god. You approach the sanctuary softly. The god statue, resting on a pedestal or enclosed in a gilded shrine, has spent the night undisturbed. You draw back the covering, speak a quiet incantation, and anoint the image with oil and perfume. You offer bread, fruit, beer, even incense. The offerings are not consumed in the way we might expect. The god takes their essence, and the food is later distributed to temple staff. You change the god's clothing, polish the statue, clean the altar. You recite hymns, very old ones, written in formal hieroglyphic script. The language is precise. Some priests memorize the entire daily cycle. This is not a loud performance. There is no audience, just the god and you. Throughout the day, more rituals are carried out: offerings, processions, festivals. On holy days, the god's statue might be carried outside in a ceremonial bark, hidden under a canopy, flanked by chanting priests and flickering torches. But for the most part, the work is private, invisible to the population, hidden behind stone. You keep watch. The temple complex also serves as a library, a treasury, a school, even a medical center. Priests might also be scribes, astrologers, physicians, or dream interpreters. Their knowledge is vast, but compartmentalized. Few priests know all the temple's rituals. Roles are assigned. Routines are followed. Priesthood was often hereditary, passed from father to son, but it was not a full-time position for most. Many served in rotations, spending 1 month in the temple and 3 at home. This allowed priestly families to maintain land and trade while still honoring their duty to the gods. But the high priests, especially of major deities like Amun or Pada, held enormous influence. In later periods, their power could rival that of the pharaoh himself. They controlled wealth, land, and access to the divine. Yet for all the ceremony and status, the life of a priest was still built on discipline, silence, and routine. You swept the floors. You anointed the statue. You poured the libation. You chanted the hymn. You left without lingering. The god did not need praise. The god needed order, the daily reaffirmation of Mat, the balance between chaos and peace. As the hours pass, the shafts of sunlight inch across the floor. The morning shadows shrink, then reform, stretch, and twist in the afternoon heat. Ritual follows ritual, punctuated by the soft murmur of your voice, echoing prayers and incantations woven by scholars long gone. The temple breathes, alive with the presence of the gods. The steady rhythm of temple life unfolds around you, a timeless cycle of devotion and service. You leave the inner sanctum, stepping out into the cool shade of the temple courts. The bustling energy of the outer temple greets you worshippers, merchants, musicians, all contributing to the vibrant tapestry of religious life. You move through this throng, your steps purposeful, your gaze steady, your presence serene amidst the ebb and flow of activity. Your role here extends beyond the silent rituals of the inner sanctum. You engage with the pilgrims, answering their questions, guiding their rituals, ensuring that the sanctity of the temple remains intact. Your knowledge, a bridge between the divine mysteries and the curious minds seeking understanding. You are a steward of tradition, a keeper of stories that have echoed through generations. As the day deepens, the temple transforms once more. Evening brings a different kind of magic. The air grows still, the shadows lengthen, and the flickering light of papyrus torches replaces the brilliance of the sun. This is a time for a different kind of devotion, a quieter communion with the gods as the day wanes. Within the temple walls, the rituals evolve, adapting to the soft hues of twilight. Incense smoke curls, carrying your evening prayers skyward. The flickering torchlight dances in your eyes, reflecting the solemn dedication in your heart. Each prayer, each hymn is a step toward the night, a lullaby to usher the gods into slumber. You stand before the idols, not just as a priest, but as a companion, sharing the peace of the evening, the stillness of the twilight hours. You are the link between the vibrant life of the day and the peaceful rest of the night. As darkness claims the sky, the temple murmurs with final prayers and blessings. The echoes of the day fade, leaving a profound quiet in their wake. With the last rites completed, you step back, allowing the tranquility of the night to envelop you. For now, the rituals are done, but the connection remains. The temple sleeps, the gods are rested, and you carry the peace within you until the first light of dawn calls you back to the start of another sacred day. And so the cycle continues, a timeless ballet of devotion and service. The rhythm of temple life flows through you, connecting you to a lineage of priests who have walked these sacred paths before you. In the heart of the temple, amidst the silent rituals and the whispered prayers, you find your purpose, your identity, your place in the grand tapestry of ancient Egyptian life. You are a priest of the temple, and your story, though unwritten, resonates with the echoes of eternity. When the doors finally closed at sunset, the gods slept once more, and so did the priests quietly, with their duties completed, their words few, and their presence unseen. This is the home of a high official, perhaps a vizier, priest, or wealthy scribe, a member of Egypt's upper classes. Walk with me through the gate. It is large, but not imposing. You step through into a shaded courtyard where palm trees and pomegranate bushes grow in orderly rows. Water trickles softly from a lotus-shaped fountain in the center, and the air smells of damp earth and crushed herbs. Welcome to my home. Inside, it is cool and dim. You remove your sandals, and a servant brings water to rinse your hands and feet. Another offers a cone of perfumed wax for your wig. This is a place of calm and luxury designed to be as hospitable as it is comfortable. The walls are painted in soft shades of ochre and turquoise, decorated with scenes of daily life, lotus flowers, and sacred symbols. The floors may be tiled or covered in woven mats. Furniture is simple but elegant: low stools, carved headrests, and folding tables. Wooden chests hold linen garments, jewelry, and writing tools. In one room, the lady of the house oversees servants preparing linen garments, carefully pleated and bleached in the sun. In another, the master reads over correspondence, perhaps dictating a letter to a distant official. His writing tools, reed pens, ink cakes, and papyrus are neatly arranged beside a carved palette. Throughout the house, the design is similar. Small courtyards break up the rooms, offering shade and privacy. Windows are shaded by woven mats. Everything is arranged to catch breezes and diffuse heat. Early in the day, the family rises and dines lightly, perhaps bread, figs, and beer. But the main meal is served later in the day, in the cool of the afternoon, when shadows lengthen and the heat has faded. For this, the kitchen staff prepares an elaborate spread: grilled duck, stewed lentils, honey cakes, and sweet wine from the Delta. This is the good life. If you have arrived as a guest, you will have been welcomed with a ritual of purification and presented with fine garments to wear during your visit. The household has transformed itself for your arrival. Musicians have arrived with lyres, flutes, and tambourines. Dancers perform in the courtyard, their feet bare, their wrists circled in gold. Incense burns from small bronze holders, and servants pour wine into alabaster cups, straining it through linen. Are you seated comfortably? Would you like something to eat or drink? Perhaps you would like to admire some artwork, relieve some boredom, or simply bask in the soothing sounds of musicians playing nearby. The women of the house wear fine linen dresses, pleated and translucent, with broad beaded collars, bracelets, and even lotus petals tucked behind the ear. The men wear short kilts, often with longer robes for formal occasions, and elegant sandals with upturned toes. A visitor might linger in the courtyard, watching servants busy themselves with their tasks or children at play. Children are present too, curious, mostly shaved-headed except for a single lock of hair. They play with carved toys, chase one another around the garden, or listen quietly to a story told in rhythmic tones by a nurse or tutor. Is there anything you would like to do now? Perhaps you are interested in board games like Senate or the recitation of poems. Some gatherings feature storytelling, myths of gods and kings, passed down in fluid poetic speech. There is laughter, but always beneath it, a thread of ritual and formality. Even leisure is shaped by tradition. Your host moves with purpose, but also ease. After all, they have the luxury of time. Unlike those who labor in the fields, these people have the means to enjoy their lives. They entertain because it is pleasurable, but also to demonstrate their status. These elite homes are not just for pleasure, but for display. Guests will note the quality of the furniture, the symmetry of the garden, the polish of the copperware. These are signs of order, of one's alignment with Mat, the divine principle of balance. And though life here is far removed from the daily labor of the fields, the elite are not idle. They manage estates, supervise scribes, maintain temple relations, and travel for royal service. Their lives are filled with responsibility and refinement equally. The family has relaxed now, and conversation flows easily. There is much to discuss: news from the temple, the latest building project, perhaps a wedding that is being planned. One might speak of literature or the arts, or recount a recent journey, even joke about the heat or the persistent flies. But the discussion never strays far from decorum. Even the children are learning how to behave with elegance and grace. They mimic adults, holding court in the garden, enacting rituals with wooden toys, mastering the art of polite speech. They are keenly aware of the importance of making a good impression. As night falls, the garden glows with oil lamps. A singer's voice rises above the rustle of leaves, soft and slow. The scent of frankincense drifts gently through the courtyard. The music drifts out into the night, mingling with the sounds of the city. Across the street, a dog barks. In the distance, the Nile glides by in silence, as steady as the stars. This is a place of calm and luxury, a place to relax, to conduct business, to raise a family, to live a life that is far removed from the labors of the fields, yet still bound to the rhythms of the divine order. The wind whispers across the desert, carrying tales of an era long gone. As I stand here, the vastness of the Sahara stretches before me, a sea of sand dunes rippling under the relentless sun. Yet my gaze is drawn to the north, where the horizon seems to hold something eternal. There, on the edge of this lifeless expanse, the emerald fields of the Nile Valley burst forth, a testament to life's enduring power. This fertile ribbon winding through the desert has been the cradle of civilization for millennia. And at its heart lies a story that transcends time, a story of life, death, and the eternal quest for understanding the mysteries that lie beyond. In the late afternoon, when the sun begins its slow descent towards the west, casting long shadows over the land, I find myself standing at the very edge of the Nile Valley, where the rich, fertile soil gives way to the arid embrace of the western desert. Here, on these dry slopes, the landscape seems to hold its breath, becoming a canvas for a story that is both haunting and profound. The West was the land of the dead. The sun set in the west, and so did the souls of the departed. Every evening, the sun god Ra sailed into the underworld, traversing the heavens in his magical boat to bring forth the light of a new day. And as he journeyed each night through the underworld, he became the star of the night sky. He would travel past the land of the dead, passing by the tombs and mummies nestled in the deserts below, on his way to reappear again in the east, announcing the dawn. For the Egyptians, the west wasn't just the direction of the sunset. It was the gateway to the realm of the dead. It was a place of mystery and reverence, where the line between the world of the living and the world of the dead seemed paper thin. When someone died, whether a humble farmer or a noble scribe, their body was brought to this western edge, to this threshold between life and death, to begin the most important journey of their existence. This was the beginning of mummification, the process of preserving a body for eternity, of turning mortal remains into something that could endure the sands of time. It was not a quick process. It could take 70 days. During this time, the body was washed, dried, wrapped, and blessed. It was a ritual designed not just to preserve the physical form, but to ensure the soul's safe passage into the afterlife. As the first step in this intricate dance of preservation, the inner organs, the liver, stomach, intestines, and lungs were removed from the body and placed in canopic jars. Each jar was guarded by a protective deity, ensuring the safekeeping of the organs and the soul's nourishment in the afterlife. The heart, believed to be the seat of the soul's essence, was left in place, for it was here that the soul's judgment would eventually take place. Interestingly, the brain was not considered important in this process and was discarded. It was only much later that humans began to understand the brain's significance. The empty space within the body was then packed with linen and resin, creating a mold that would hold the shape of the body as it moved on to its next form. Layer upon layer of fine cloth was used to wrap the body, each fold accompanied by spells and prayers. These bandages were not just for preservation. They were infused with magic. Amulets were tucked into the wrappings, symbols of protection and guidance for the soul's journey, such as the Eye of Horus, scarabs, and knots of Isis. These served as talismans against the dangers that lay ahead. The face, once the canvas of life's joys and sorrows, was now carefully painted to resemble the divine. Sometimes a simple mask was placed over the head, while in other cases, the mask was richly gilded and adorned with precious materials, transforming the deceased into an echo of the gods themselves. This wasn't just about aesthetics. It was about elevating the dead to a level of divinity, making them resemble the gods they believed in. With the body prepared and blessed, it was time to move on to the next part of the journey. The burial itself was more than just the placement of a body into a tomb. It was a ceremony of passage, a ritual that marked the transition from life to death. Professional mourners, often women, would gather to weep and wail in stylized lamentation. Their cries echoed across the desert, expressing the sorrow of parting, but also the acceptance of the inevitable. Priests led the rituals, burning incense and laying out offerings of bread, beer, meat, fruit, flowers, and more, ensuring the dead had everything they might need on their journey and in the afterlife. Before the tomb was sealed, however, one final ritual was performed: the opening of the mouth. A priest would touch the mummy's face with special tools, reciting incantations meant to restore sight, hearing, speech, and the ability to eat and drink. This was not just a symbolic gesture. It was a crucial part of ensuring the dead had the ability to interact with their surroundings in the afterlife. The tomb itself was carefully prepared to ensure the deceased had everything they might need in the afterlife. Even modest burials had painted scenes on the walls, depicting fields, boats, servants, and food. These were not mere decorations. They were magical substitutes, ensuring the dead had everything they needed. More elaborate tombs included lists of offerings, spells from the Book of the Dead, and even false doors, symbolic passages between the worlds of the living and the dead. Inside the tomb, the body, now a mummy, was placed in a sarcophagus. In some cases, this sarcophagus was nested within multiple coffins, each adding another layer of protection and grandeur to the burial chamber. Around the sarcophagus were stored all that the soul might require: clothing, tools, cosmetics, jewelry, games, and even tiny servants called shabdi figures, carved from clay or stone. These shabdi were ready to work in the fields of the afterlife on behalf of the dead, ensuring they wouldn't have to toil in the next world. The soul's journey, however, was not a straightforward path. According to Egyptian beliefs, the soul was made up of several parts: the Ka, or life force, the Ba, or personality, and the Ak, the transformed spirit. Each of these parts had its own needs, and each had to be considered. As the soul neared the end of its earthly journey, it faced the final and most crucial test: It stood before Osiris, the Lord of the Dead, in the Hall of Truth. Here the heart, the seat of the soul's essence, was weighed on a golden scale against the feather of Maat, the principle of truth and order. Anubis, the guardian of the scales, watched solemnly as the judgment unfolded. If the heart was heavy with wrongdoing, it was devoured by Ammit, a fearsome creature with the head of a crocodile and the body of a lion. In this case, the soul was destroyed forever, and the journey beyond came to a terrifying end. But if the heart was light, if it was filled with kindness, generosity, and truth, the soul was granted passage into the field of reeds. This was a paradise much like life on earth, but free of suffering, hunger, and grief. The fields were lush, and the food was plentiful. There were no more worries, no more pain, only the gentle flow of the river and the rhythm of the sun and stars above. Here in the field of reeds, the dead could reunite with family and friends, engaging in all the activities they had enjoyed in life, but now in a state of perfect balance and harmony. It was a place of eternal youth, where one could fish or hunt or simply bask in the beauty of the surroundings, knowing that nothing could ever disturb this perfect existence. The journey of the soul didn't end with death. It continued even after reaching the field of reeds. It was a continuous process, a perpetual journey of renewal and existence. While the soul basked in the fields of reeds, the living continued to care for the dead. Families would bring offerings to the tombs, and priests would recite prayers and speak the dead person's name aloud. To the Egyptians, being forgotten was the ultimate fate worse than death itself. It was a second death, a fate worse than any the underworld could offer. Standing here at the edge of the desert, I feel a profound connection to those who came before me. I can almost hear the echoes of their rituals, feel the weight of their beliefs in the very air around me. The Egyptians, with their intricate rituals and unwavering belief in an afterlife, teach us how to approach death not with fear, but with understanding, respect, and reverence. As I watch the sun sink below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, I am reminded of the cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth. Just as the sun sets and rises again, the souls of the dead journey through the underworld, returning to the light of day. Their stories, though ancient, continue to guide us, offering a timeless perspective on the mysteries that lie beyond our mortal existence. Thank you for joining me on this journey through time and belief. If you found this video insightful, I invite you to explore more content where ancient wisdom meets modern understanding. Let us know in the comments what aspects of the Egyptian afterlife you found most intriguing. Your thoughts matter, and we look forward to engaging with you. Until next time, may your journey through life be filled with wonder, and your journey beyond be filled with peace.